Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. And do I have a guest for you today? I know I say that every single week, so I know you're bored of hearing that, but I don't know how I get these incredible guests reaching out to me and saying, hey, I'd love to be on your podcast. This particular guest was introduced to me by a friend of mine, and when I first read through her bio and what she did, I was completely and totally impressed. But I thought, well, let's see, what does that have to do with crafting a meaningful life? And as you well know, all of my listeners who are with me every week, that the topics we talk about are so varied. There's no end to the different things and pieces that help us craft our meaningful life. And as I read through Rachel's bio, I just thought, oh, I want you to meet her. So welcome to the show, Rachel Miner. Thank you for being with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I know that you originally, at some point in time, lived in Utah because I saw that your bachelor's degree was from BYU.
That's right. I actually started at BYU on a studio art scholarship. And then after some time working on the Hill, after I served a Latter-day Saint mission in Washington State, I realized that I was making art about changing the world. And I thought, I wonder if there's another skill set I could get to support changing the world through policy and not just art. Art is still part of my practice and still part of my lifestyle. But I, shortly after working in DC, switched to economics. And that's ultimately what I graduated in from BYU. So I like to think about economics as a kind of art. You can certainly practice it as a science and be very theoretical, but I'm an applied economist, which means all of the models and the calculus I'm using to really shape and think about real world problems.
Well, BYU was just the beginning. I'm just going to read this from your bio to make sure that I get this correct. After that, you went on to get your master's in public administration at the London School of Economics and Political Science. That's pretty prestigious. But then you got a second master's in economic and political development at Columbia. And what a very prestigious university. You kind of really by that point had set your feet in a direction that for some reason, and that's what I want to talk about first, for some reason, you were just drawn to this area of studying and eliminating genocide in our world today. So how did that process happen that you really have zeroed in on this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So after DC, after studying economics, I then moved to London. I saw what economics could do in the public policy space, and I thought, I wonder if economics can do as much good in the nonprofit space. So I actually worked for a nonprofit in London, and their mission was centered around responding to the Yazidi genocide. And I had never heard of the Yazidis. I just worked in the Senate. I'd never heard of this religious minority group in Iraq that was targeted by a terrorist group called ISIS or Daesh. And it was really disturbing to me that genocide was happening in modern day. And this was in 2019, 4 years after their genocide, 5 years after their genocide. But it triggered for me a memory that I had in high school when we learned about the Holocaust. I remember learning about the Holocaust and the U.S. involvement in World War II. And, you know, people talk about the history as the U.S. having such a delayed involvement in the war and a delayed response to helping save Jews from the Holocaust. And I did some of the mental math in high school and realized my grandparents were alive. So I truly went home from high school that day and called my grandparents and said, did you know this was happening? And what did you do about it? And tried to kind of wrestle this idea of when we know that something is happening in the world, what is our responsibility to act?
Yeah.
So all of these experiences that shaped me kind of came together during my time in London, and I realized First, that genocide was going to increase in the world. There were no large-scale efforts that I could find in 2019 of organizations thinking about prevention at scale. And no one was taking an economic approach. There was very strong legal approaches. I mean, the United Nations was really created as a legal mechanism to prevent things like the Holocaust from happening again. But I thought, I think economics could do more because unfortunately, the value of human life has never motivated governments to act. But the
Uh,
value of money has. So
every
maybe
day. Yeah.
economics could be the key to tackling some of the greatest human rights challenges in our world. And that's when I started my organization, Bellwether International, with a mission to disrupt cycles of genocide and really take an economic approach in doing that.
It is interesting. In your generation, you went home and asked your grandparents. And for me, in my generation, I'm 72. So I asked my parents. My father fought in World War II. Like, and in all my growing up years, I never heard that piece of it spoken about. It was about, yes, we fought the war and we did these things and we went in and we liberated Germany out and we, defeated the Japanese, but no one spoke about the Jewish people that were being exterminated very just methodically. And even now today, in fact, I just recently visited Auschwitz, and the thought of this kind of group think that it was appropriate, doable, and beyond human comprehension, that the German people as a whole actually kind of knew what was going on and went along with it. That's a different kind of mind think than I can even comprehend. And we would like to have thought that that was exactly what was happening then. We learned our lesson in World War II, and it certainly does not exist in our world today. But as you know, that it very much does. So as you look at some of the hot spots around the world that you are focusing on, where genocide is happening today, where are some of those places?
The really interesting thing about genocide, and let me just put a definition to this word because it's a word we hear a lot in the news, and
Right.
people can politicize any word. Any word can be politicized, but the UN definition, which is broadly accepted by scholars and practitioners like myself, is the intent to destroy a group of people in whole or in part based on identity. So this is identity-motivated violence. And in the UN Convention, there's 4 identity groups that are specifically protected:
Mm,
ethnic, national, religious, and racial. So
mm,
political groups actually are not included in the definition. Gender is not included in the definition, even though we know that there are large-scale attacks against women in countries around the world, things like femicide or
yeah,
gender apartheid in Afghanistan.
yeah.
So it's important to understand that this is a definition that people accept and use, and it is prosecuted in courts of law. It's also, at its heart, defined with the intention to save lives. Defining genocide in the UN Convention was created with what we call the responsibility to protect. As soon as we start to see early warning signs of genocide, nations that have signed this convention have a legal obligation to do everything they can to stop genocide. So some
Mm,
people, get really caught up in, is it genocide or isn't genocide? Is it not genocide? As opposed to spending that energy thinking, what is our obligation, our legal obligation to prevent genocide? And that's really where Bellwether's work is centered. So where are the hotspots? We know that the largest genocide that's happening right now in our world is in Sudan. This
mm,
is the result of almost 20 years of conflict that started with Darfur, a U.S. recognized genocide. And in 2015, after a political coup, that violence really continued. Those cycles of genocide continued. We know that there is genocide happening in Palestine. The UN has declared that. We know that there are other hot spots in Africa and the Middle East, but also in Asia. And I think it's interesting because we kind of forget, we have short-term memory loss with the way that the news cycle operates. But 2017 and 2018, the US acknowledged the Uyghur genocide in China and the Rohingya genocide in Burma, and those are ongoing as well. So those are the major hotspots that we're talking about. And of course, there's more. People always ask me, like, well, which one is the most important? And I always ask them, how many children do you have? And they get a little
Yeah.
confused. I'm like, if you have more than 3 or 4 children, you know that all of your children can be suffering at the same time, and you don't create a hierarchy between those children, right? And that's part of the global approach that I think we need to take. Every country that's having these atrocities is hurting, and we don't have to, in our world today, because there are so many resources and there's so much we can do to respond. We don't actually have to create that pyramid of the most persecuted or the most suffering. You know, anytime any person is suffering, we should respond. We should have that motivation to prevent the worst things from happening and respond.
You know, you are the founder and CEO of a nonprofit organization, Bellwether International. And when I first heard that word bellwether, I was like, what is that? What? I've never heard that word. Is that somebody's name? And so it was really interesting for me to discover exactly what that means and what an appropriate title for that is. Share that with my listeners.
Bellwether is an inspired title. Came across it in a human rights report. It has 2 meanings. The first goes back to ancient sheep herding. In every flock of sheep, there is one sheep that's kind of identified as the leader, that the master shepherd will tie a bell around its neck, and it becomes the bellwether, so that the sheep,
Yeah.
when the shepherd's not there or when the shepherd is there, can follow the bellwether. The flock can follow the bellwether and know exactly where to go. And obviously, as a devout Christian, that has enormous spiritual significance for me
Hmm.
and the way I've tried to model my life. But it also has financial implications. So bellwether stocks are the stocks in a market that indicate the trends of how things are going to play out
Oh.
over time. So if you watch the bellwethers, you kind of know where the patterns are going. You know what to expect, you know what's coming. So in both definitions of the word, we are trying to be the bellwether for human rights. We are trying to be the bellwether for a world where it is possible. It is possible to prevent genocide. It is possible to decrease this global trend towards identity-based violence. And we know it's possible because we've seen it work. There are actual countries that have been able to stop or prevent genocide. For every Rwanda, there's a Liberia. And a lot of these case studies haven't really been studied, which is part of what I'm hoping to do with my education in economics. So becoming a bellwether on a global scale means stopping genocide. But becoming a bellwether at a local level means that you look at your sphere of influence and you figure out, how can I be a leader and take the initiative and model for the people around me what it looks like to choose love over hate. And I feel like you're doing that with this podcast. This is a bellwether podcast. And all of us can kind of find that sphere of influence and become bellwethers in our life.
Thank you, Rachel, because that is exactly why I do this. I don't make money off my podcast. It costs me a lot of money and time to do it, but I do want to be that light that says something else is possible. We do not have to accept the status quo and what has always been. You know, some of my big focuses, of course, have been ending childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence. And people are like, well, you can't really end childhood sexual abuse, Mary. I mean, it's been going on since the beginning of time. And that's how it is with genocide. I'm sure people have said to you, well, you can't really eliminate genocide. I mean, it's practiced back in biblical times and before. So you can't really do that. What do you say to people who are absolutely do not believe in your mission of eliminating this from our world?
I do get this question a lot. I
Yeah.
think particularly because it just feels like the world is on fire and we're just really in a time of crisis. I think people are having real wrestles with paralysis. When you wake up and roll over and the first app you open is social media and you see the breaking news of identity-based violence all over the world, you want to just pull the covers over your head and go back to sleep and pull your people a little tighter, and it can be
Yeah.
scary. It can be really discouraging and depressing, but genocide really is unlike any kind of violence. It takes years to plan. It takes years to convince people to kill and be killed for their identity. And one of the myths that we've told ourselves about genocide is that it's so complex we can't understand it. That's completely untrue.
Yeah.
It's actually so predictable that we can tell you exactly how genocide is going to roll out in any given country, because you have to follow a kind of playbook in order to commit a violent act of this scale. And so in that sense, it can be really morbid and discouraging. For me, though, that's the most hopeful part of genocide. Some other forms of
Mm.
violence, even like abuse, pretty spontaneous. There are some indicators about, generational predispositions or alcohol abuse. So there are some indicators, but it's much harder to kind of track and hold people accountable. Genocide is perpetrated by governments. It happens on a very large scale, sometimes by non-state actors, sometimes at a community level. But like I said, we can see when it's coming. And so then the next question is always, well, how do we know? And what do we do when we see those early warning signs? I'll never forget having a conversation with some survivors of genocide in Rwanda. And we were there during a particularly political tense moment in the United States. And they just asked me, will genocide happen in your country? And
Yeah.
I thought, my gosh, no, first of all, it's not going to happen in the US anytime soon. We're not into that playbook far enough that we're seeing mass atrocities roll out. But could it happen? Yes, it can happen anywhere in the world. No one thought it could happen in a European country. And then we had the Holocaust in Germany. No
Yeah.
one thought it would happen in a European country after the Holocaust, and then it happened in Bosnia in the 90s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to develop a mentality that we're somehow exempt from working every day to tackle hate, I think is misinformed. But we have to figure out, what does it look like? And I think the poem, going back to the Holocaust, the poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller, which is inscribed on the wall of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, tells you exactly how genocide plays out in a country. And when you think about this moment in the US, you can see some of the patterns. You just have to kind of adopt that lens of who, where, how is the hate coming? But this poem is really short. I'll share it. He writes, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, but I did not speak out because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews. I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." And I think that shows you the greatest challenge to disrupting genocide ideology or the cycles of genocide is convincing people to speak out against hatred. And when we see any identity group that's not our own having the courage to say, no, 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 that's not okay with us. You can't do that. We're not okay with that. Because if you can do it to them, you're going to do it to us. And that takes a kind of moral courage and faith and energy that I think people maybe have forgotten how to channel that and really activate that.
When you read that poem, I just got chills on my body. I mean, I felt like my whole shiver go through my whole body, because that is really, in a nutshell, why, our why for today, for now, of why, even at my age, it would be so easy. I look at the rest of my people who are my age, they're playing golf, they're doing this. They're not spending, their time and energies, at least a lot of them, in this kind of thing, because they don't think it applies to them. They're like, that's somebody else's problem. And the only way to look at this problem is as a whole. And not a whole with HOLE, and a hole that you can never get out of, but as a whole with a W,
Right.
that we are all as one. I just have so many questions running through my mind. I recently made a post on social media that said, this thing in the United States that we're involved with. This is not a matter of the left and the right. This is not a matter of the Democrats and the Republicans. This is not a matter of the liberals and the conservatives. This is a matter of your soul, of where you and how you are. You are either promoting hate and fear and division, or you're about promoting divine unity and oneness and love. Both sides have people in both camps. So if we see the solution then as being less this way and more this way, no one person would stand up and say, oh, I totally want to be about hate and fear. Well, maybe that's not all right. But most people don't stand up and say, I choose hate. I choose fear. I choose to be better than you. Most people want to choose this side. Sometimes they don't know how. That's why I do my podcast. That's why you do the work you do. We're trying to show a way and a path. Rachel, on your website, and here even on this podcast already, you listed the reasons for genocide. I was surprised to see on your website listed as the number one reason for genocide was religious. Did I get that right?
Yeah, what you're pointing to is who has been affected by genocide. So more religious people have been affected by genocide than any of those other identity groups. There is ethnically motivated genocide, that was Rwanda, but Muslims and Jews are predominantly the victims of genocide based on the genocides that the U.S. has designated and acknowledged.
And I'm not quite sure where that originates. I mean, there must be some origins of this. I know the biblical origins, when you have two sons and you love one more than the other, and or when you ban one wife and her lineage and you favor the other wife and her lineage. I mean, those are biblical things. Are they still affecting us today?
Absolutely. Let me start by saying that I'm an extremely religious person. As I mentioned, I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who, as we saw this weekend, are not exempt from identity-based violence. And I just want to acknowledge that my prayers and heart go out to our community and to every community that suffered from similar identity-based attacks. It's not okay. And we have to do something to stop it now. It is plaguing this country and other countries, and every country in the world is watching the United States right now, holding their breath, waiting to see what happens.
Absolutely.
So we have to act now. But why is there this religious component? Honestly, this is what started my work with Bellwether, because I saw the Yazidis, another religious minority, was being targeted. The relationship between religion and genocide, it's hard to say. Religion does have a very strong narrative around good and evil, around binaries. And what happens with religion is we see this in every faith, but there's this feeling of wanting to sacrifice and die for what you believe. If that becomes poisoned by other political motivations to dominate people, to dominate land, to dominate resources at any cost. What ends up happening is religion becomes mingled with the philosophies of men, and soon we lose track of the religious
Mm,
principle versus the
sure.
religious identity. And so what happens is you have people who go out with really good intentions, quote unquote, who then completely lose sight of what religion actually teaches. All faith, from what I've studied all the major religions in the world, promote a concept called human dignity. This
Yep.
belief that God or an all-powerful creator has given humans an inherent dignity that makes them inalienable, wonderful, valuable, treasured, precious. Human dignity is at the heart of all religion. And I will say a lot of non-religious secular beliefs, like the humanist movement, a lot of atheists subscribe to human
Yep.
dignity elsewhere. So this
Right.
really is, if you boil everything down, human dignity should be the faith of mankind. It should be the identity that matters most, this idea of humanity. But like I said, if you lose track of that, what happens? You get a little bit of religion and then a lot of bit of nationality, and suddenly I have to go out and kill for my religion. I have to go out
Yeah.
and destroy for my religion. A lot of crusades were justified in this way. The slave trade was justified in this way. Colonialism was justified in this way. So we
Yeah.
have to constantly, as religious people who have both been the victims of genocide and the perpetrators, we have to check ourselves and think, is my religion supporting the core principles of human dignity? Or have I lost sight of the core principles and now I'm weaponizing my faith to achieve my political ambitions or goals, whatever they may be? And that's a tightrope. And we all have to check ourselves. None of us are immune from that temptation to not just, weaponize religion, but to weaponize power in any form. Power and money really do corrupt people, and we lose sight of what human dignity is and
Yeah.
how important it is to constantly be vigilant in our defense of human dignity.
I I want to take that statement that you just made and that question and emblazon it across the sky. That are we weaponizing our religion? That's a question we all should be asking. And it is the exact opposite of what most religious, well, all, like you stated, religious views. That's my research in it as well, that there isn't anyone in any place that their formal religion is not promoting human dignity. That's the basis of it. And, one time I had someone ask me, Mary, why do the Mormons still have the Old Testament in their Bible? And I said, I was like, I don't know, that's just part of the Bible. I don't question such things. And they said to me, well, seriously, because I mean, you are a Christian religion, you believe in Christ. And that seems to be a whole new part of religion. And he said, I am Jewish. That seems to be our book, not yours. Why did you keep it? Why did you include it? And I told him, I said, I don't have the answer to that, but let me think on that and I'll get back to you. And I honestly did spend a lot of time thinking about why we still have the Old Testament. And yes, you could say that it was, there's a lot of great stories. There's a lot of great lessons to be learned in the Old Testament. But clearly they had a choice to include that or not include that. And they chose to. And I called him back and I said, I think I know the answer. And he said, really? I've asked a lot of Christians this, and no one has ever given me an answer. I don't know if this is accurate or not, but this is what I think. I said, at the Nicene Conference, when they had a choice to what to include in their canonized scripture, they did not believe Christ. And they did not believe that love was enough to control people. that people would choose the right, that people would want to be their very best self. So they kept all the punishment, all the shame, all the killing parts, so that they could help control people, because love was not enough. I see that today. We do not believe that people will choose to be good in and of themselves, that they need outside pressure, influence to debase another human being, that the way to create congregation, the way to create unity, is to create that I'm different than and better than someone else. Okay, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No, I'll just respond to that. I'm no historian of the Bible, but I am an observer of the world. I've been to over 50 countries, and I spend time with people that don't really make it into the news cycle. I like to think of my work as extending just beyond what's reported, for good and bad. I wish in many cases that more things were reported, the good and the bad. For example, we're not even talking about Sudan. No one even really has Sudan on their radar, even though this is, 10 times the scale of what's happening in the Middle East right now. But also the good stories. You have to go out and find them. And so I spend a lot of time with genocide survivors, with these local communities. And one of the things that they've taught me is that the world is good. And you'd think, now how is that possible, Rachel? You're going to the people who have survived the worst human rights violation. There's nothing worse than genocide. There's nothing worse.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that those are the people who have convinced you that the world is still good? Yes, Mary. Those are the people who have showed me the power of choosing human dignity and choosing love. And they choose it every single day. One woman that I work with from Bosnia-Herzegovina survived the genocide in Srebrenica as a small child, and she ended up writing a beautiful book about her experience. The title of the book is My Smile is My Revenge. And that, I think, is the lesson. When you choose good, when you choose love, when you choose religious humility over religious nationalism, then you are creating a world where the good will win over evil. There really is, particularly in the global north in the US, where we consume news constantly, distortion. Not, I would say, in the ways that people think. I don't think journalists are evil. I don't think that they are out there reporting falsehoods. I meet them. They have 6 kids they're trying to feed. They just want to go home at the end of the day. Like, this is their job. They have master's degrees in journalism. They're not wicked or evil. But the nature of their work is to report the extraordinary, the extraordinary. But if you're consuming anything, any food, good or bad, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're going to get sick. You're going to get really sick. And yet that's the culture we've created, this kind of constant media binge that is poisoning our ability to discern how good the world is. And the more that ticks towards the world is evil and there are no good people left, the more existential we'll feel, the more apathy, the more overwhelm. So part of what we do as bellwethers is when you're consuming the media, particularly as a person of faith, when you draw upon things like the spirit or meditation or other practices to discern, go through the exercise of consuming cautiously, as you would any food, right? You don't eat 24 donuts in a day just because they're available and free and on TikTok. You gotta take it slow and then really try to discern, is this extraordinary? Is this a pattern? And then the most important question, is this in my sphere of influence and is there something I should do about it? And if you get to those questions and realize this is happening in my state, my backyard, my community, my faith community, you can do something about it. You can call and get involved on a policy level, it takes 2 minutes to call your senator. They log every single call. I did it by hand during my work on the Hill. You can get involved with your education groups, the board, the schools. You can volunteer. You can get involved with your religious community and go to your leaders and say, hey, we need to do something about this. You can get involved with nonprofits like Bellwether. We have to, once we discern the scale, the proportionality of what we're consuming, truly be able to say, and what am I going to do about it? If the answer is, like you pointed earlier, this is not my problem, it will be your problem eventually, by
Yeah.
choice or by force. So you can decide now to be part of it in a manageable way, or we can all let this go unchecked for another 4, 5, 6 years, and we'll be confronting a much larger problem.
I love that thought process and that look. For me, you also have to decide on what your bandwidth is. And I can't attack every single problem in the world. And so
That's
I
right.
look at my bandwidth. I've been to Africa 4 times. I've been to Ukraine twice. I see the problem. I know my bandwidth and I know my influence and what can be done. It's more, so much more than what most people see can be done. That we can help. We can make a stand. We can be, if we're so consumed with social media, then let's make social media the place where we show people the options of how you can be involved in there's this organization. Just like on Saturday, I gathered together 100 women. It's called My 100 Women of Hope. And we sewed underwear that's going to Kenya. And I mean, there's just so much that can be done in small groups. You don't have to be going off to help people in foreign countries. There's something available for us right now.
Amen.
In bringing, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just
Oh,
giving an amen to that, because that's the gospel truth. And if we think about our sphere of influence in any other way, we're going to get buried.
yeah.
I think there is a balance, and this is why I say, like, involving the spirit or meditation or your spiritual practice, so you know what your divine assignments are, what your divine stewardship is, and what your calling is to respond. But truly thinking first and foremost about your family unit. Mary, no one can help your family the way you can. It wouldn't matter if I had all the money in the world. If I knocked on your door and said, Mary, I'm moving in to your house, I'm going to solve all your problems and pay for it, you would say, get out of my house.
Uh,
That is not sustainable for you or me or anyone. But if you help your family and then you think, okay, I have more bandwidth. So you host a podcast and then you think,
yeah.
I have more bandwidth. So then you travel and you get involved with international work. That's what it means to be a bellwether. We call it the glocal approach. You start local,
Oh, I
you
love
build
that.
your bandwidth, and then it becomes global with time and expertise and resources. But truly starting where you are, so that a nonprofit doesn't have to do the cleanup work from your sphere of influence later. That
Uh,
is the strategy or a government, right? A nonprofit or a government that will have to clean up these failures in the home or in our neighborhoods. That's what it means to be a bellwether.
so as my listeners ponder and listen to this podcast, I'm sure they're thinking, well, okay, then I'm just going to work within my family. But when the people do create, like I'm retired now, I have more bandwidth than I did to devote to these kinds of things. So how would someone get involved? How would someone step into this world of truly moving the needle with genocide in the year 2025? That we still have this is truly, it's incredible, and that we really are not moving the needle. But I looked at your website. There are so many places you have moved the needle. So what is your word to us of like how we begin to support and help changing that scenario?
Time, talents, or funding. I have my grandpa used to say, if money can solve the problem, then solve it. Of course, financial donations, particularly when it's a group like Bellwether. We have no overhead. We don't have a brick and mortar office. We all work remote. All my staff are locals who live in the communities where we work. When you donate $10 to Bellwether, it actually pays for one woman's entire trauma healing program. So
What?
$10. That's less than a streaming service. That's less than anything else. Our average project cost is between $11 to $25 a person.
I
So
did
I'm
see that.
not going to shy away from the M word. I'm going to say money makes a huge difference in this cause, and
Yeah.
maybe that's what your bandwidth allows. If not, let's talk about time. Time devoted to thinking about these issues, talking about them in an informed way, because social media is part of our world, because information is part of our world. When you get on and you follow us and then you share something we've posted, that helps the cause. That's advocacy that moves the needle forward in conversations we're trying to have. When you engage with these issues, when you spend time listening to Mary's podcast or other podcast discussions I've done, thinking about these issues in the worldview, that matters. The time you take to call a senator, the time you take to show up for a nonviolent, peaceful protest to say, we're really not okay with this. We want to see difference. Time is so valuable. And then I add talent to that. Talent requires the most bandwidth. I tried to do it in order of bandwidth. Money is the fastest, easiest, and goes a very long
Yep.
way. And is next, and then talent. If you have talent, you want to contribute some marketing, or we just partnered with an amazing Utah business, Chatbooks. They helped us
Yeah.
publish our
Yeah.
impact
Yeah.
report. So shout out to them. Like these kinds of talent donations where they say, we have something we can do really well and we'll step in and provide that service. Huge. It's a huge lift. And I think what I'm most proud of at Bellwether is that whatever you give, we're going to use really effectively. And that's what we've spelled out, as I mentioned, in our recently 5-year impact report. This is a boots on the ground organization. I have a background in economics. If I wanted to go work for a name brand consulting firm, trust me, I could, but I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm not doing this for money or fame or any other reason. This is my divine assignment from God. And I know that with any of those things, time, talent, money, we will move the needle on this and we'll get more effective with time. When you invest in Bellwether, part of the return on investment is that over time, we will see the decrease in genocide in our world. We will be able to, like later this year, we're publishing a toolkit on how to be a disruptor in genocide cycles. Wherever you live in the world, these things will play out in our world, and all of us will benefit from the return on investment, which is peace.
Yeah. Which is peace. Rachel, thank you for being with us today. And at the end of the podcast, we've included your LinkedIn profile as well as your website so people can go on and learn more about you. Very, very few people have taken on this responsibility, this job, this joy of eliminating this from our world. You are one of the few. You're one of the chosen, and that is for sure. And I'm so glad to have met you and to be involved with this. Here I'm sitting in Utah in my comfortable living room, in my wingback chairs, and I can hear you're in your apartment in New York City. We live two completely different lives. But Rachel, the thing is that we are both focused on the same dream. The dream of humankind is oneness. And we're both coming at it from different directions, but the vision is the same. And I just am so honored to have met you and be part of your world now.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me on. And I really can't take all of the credit. I have a phenomenal team, my employees, my board, the volunteers, every single donor we've had, all of our partners, and truly people like you who you've given your time and talent today. So I'm grateful. We are all going to be part of this movement. And in the end, like you said, if we adopt that vision of human dignity for the world, we will be able to prevent these big problems from happening and pass on stories to our children. When my children call and learn about the Holocaust in high school and they learn about the challenges of our day, they'll say, "Mom, what did you do about it?" And I'll say, A lot. I did a lot,
Yeah.
and you can too.
Even now I have my grandchildren say to me, "So, Grandma, were you aware, like, during the civil rights movement? I mean, did you ever see Black people, like, have to sit in the back of the bus or use a different bathroom or not be allowed into a restaurant?" Absolutely. I grew up in the 50s. Absolutely. And I did make a decision in the 60s to make a stand about what my life was going to be about. And I asked them every week, what is your life going to be about? Where are you standing? Yeah.
It's
All right,
beautiful.
Rachel, thank you so much for today. And until next time, as this week you're crafting that meaningful life, it's time to ponder. You have your sphere, which is so important. This is where you center the most valuable things that you do. And then begin to expand that sphere just bit by bit by bit. And someday I hope to be serving on that global level, the way Rachel is, and influencing people around the world. Remember, I'm the one that's living to 105, so I've still got, almost 30 years still left to be doing this. Join me on this in crafting our meaningful lives. Namaste.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.